every single pro rider is off their bike, running through the thick mud. I don't think anybody expected their day to start like this, but you know what? We were loving every second of it.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Lauf Gravel Worlds.
Welcome back to the Drew Dillman YouTube channel. We're at the Lauf Gravel Worlds in the rolling hills of Lincoln, Nebraska. It's 150 miles through the cornfields, and you might think that Nebraska is a pretty flat state, but you're dead wrong. There weren't any climbs that were sustained for longer than about a mile, but when you add up all the climbing, you nearly get to 10,000 feet. It's like a death by a million little cuts. The race starts at 6 a.m., bright and early for us pros, and that means that everybody has to race with lights on the front and the back of their bike, and it's pretty cool. It's pretty iconic racing through the gravel roads of Lincoln in the dark as the sun starts to rise. Pretty cool experience. And right away, the pace is lit. I am still surprised at how crazy fast the beginning of these really long races tend to be. But I have learned through my experience that if you can make it through the initial torching, there does become a point where the pace does settle into a still painful yet manageable rate. Dizzle Kibitz number 19. Pacing is dead. I got sick about 2 weeks before this race, so I was really up in the air about how I was gonna feel, and I had almost written it off as a training race. I had to skip the race the week before in Iowa, the Core 4 gravel, which I won the year prior. So I had to forego going to that race because I still hadn't recovered. And I finally got back to feeling normal the Monday before Gravel Worlds. And so I did what every good coach would do. Panic training. So for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I clocked 16 hours of training before I traveled to Lincoln, Nebraska for this race. So I figured I was probably going to be a little fatigued going into a 150-mile race that Saturday. And adding to the chaos of this race, my teammate Chase Wark suffered a flat tire about 10 miles into the race, and I had figured we would never see him again because the pace was already so fast, and I figured that all of the weight of getting a result on behalf of our team now was on my shoulders. Not off to a great start for lunchbox racing. With that being said, I had drifted pretty far back into the peloton over the course of the first 15 miles of this race and knew that we were approaching the first MMR, minimum maintenance road. And I knew that these could be treacherous, and it had rained a little bit the night before, so there were some hesitations about some mud having been on the course. So I made a mega move that we were on like a 2-track course, and I just blitzed it up the left side of the track. Luckily, it was pretty clear on the left side, and I went from basically the back of the peloton to like top 10. And that one single move may have saved my entire race from disaster. And we hit this first MMR, and it was rideable for most people, but it still caused quite a bit of chaos with a lot of pros having to stop to unclog their bikes from the mud bog that was there. And not long after this first MMR, I look over and see Chase has chased his way back to the lead group, and I am stoked because I figured his race was done and dusted for, and I expected not to see him again until the finish. So I was pumped to see that we were both in the lead group after that first muddy section. And not too much further down the road, we hit the second MMR, which was quite a bit worse than the first one. It absolutely wreaked havoc on the front of this pro field. About the full peloton went into this mud bog, and only about 20 came out. Only 2 teams surviving this MMR, the Hit Squad and Lunchbox Racing. As soon as we hit the really thick mud, it was pretty chaotic. There was a pretty big pileup. I actually end up running into Chase as we both crashed, and immediately everybody is off their bike and running at this point. And just after this crash, me and Chase are running next to each other, and Chase looks at me and says,
"Dude, fucking break away right now. Do it."
You gotta give it to this guy for mental fortitude. 20 minutes ago, he was off the back thinking that his race was over. Now he's on the front thinking he's gonna solo away to victory. Pfft, what a comeback. Dizzle Kibitz number 22, stay positive. I quickly just threw my bike on the shoulder cyclocross style because I didn't want to get clogged up with mud, and I just started clogging away. I didn't want to sprint, but I didn't want to stop at all. So I was committed to running until we could ride again. So I just was running and running and running, and everybody else was running in the grass. I didn't get the memo. I just stayed right on the side of the road. My shoes were already clogged with mud, so it didn't really matter if I was in the grass or the mud. And I was just committed to running. My bike wasn't getting clogged with mud because it was on my shoulder, so no big deal. Eventually, I do drift over to the side into the grass, and I stop for only 15 seconds, and that was just to clear the mud from around my road cleats. Note to self, not great for mud, but I didn't know there was gonna be that much. Anyways, note also, I did not have to stop at all to unclog mud from my bike. The Lauf Gravel was designed purposely with massive tire clearance, and we decided to run smaller tires. I was only on 40s for this race because it's pretty smooth and pretty fast. So I had insane amount of tire clearance and never had to stop for mud getting clogged in my bike. This is awesome, and it gave me and Chase a massive advantage. We come out of this treacherous mud section, and Chase has got a gap off the front by himself, and I am in a small chase group with Keegan, Tobjorn, and a few other strong guys. And one of the very interesting aspects or rules of this race is no team tactics. And team tactics in this situation would say, I'm not gonna pull through because I have a teammate off the front, so it doesn't make sense for me to try to chase down my teammate. However, it gets quite complicated in defining team tactics, because I could be using team tactics, or I could just be pulling an Adam Roberge and just not pull through for no apparent reason at all. And let me hit you with a double Dizzle Kibitz. Dizzle Kibitz number 5, pulling is a choice, not a requirement. And Dizzle Kibitz number 27, know the rules. Chase's solo move off the front for victory is not very long-lived. With this many strong guys in the race, it's hard for a solo move to actually be sustained to the finish, and quite honestly, probably not a smart idea. Cam Jones, the winner of the Unbound 200 this year, is dumb strong. What I mean by this is that there were so many times when he was just sitting on the front of our group drilling the pace for no apparent reason. I hated every moment of it as I was dangling on the back of the group. It seemed like his strategy for the race was, me strong like bull, me drop everyone. And he probably was the strongest rider in the race, but he ended up getting 3rd place. And what I mean is that had he played his cards a little smarter, he could have potentially won the race. Dizzle Kibitz number 15, conserve energy. Here's Tobin just trying to prove to me that he's better at cyclocross than I am. My water stop strategy was to try and stop early so that I didn't have to stop later, and I'd be on the lookout to see what other riders were going to stop as well. So as we approach the first aid station, I'm at the back of the group, and I notice that Cam Jones and Julian Gagne have both stopped to fill up their bottles. And with these two strong riders, I know that we'll be able to chase back to the group. So I decided to stop as well, figuring if I fill up my bottles now, I may not be in a pinch later if I have to skip one of the later aid stations. And here is my nutrition plan for the race. Since there is zero outside support at Gravel Worlds, you have to start the race with all your carbs on hand. So I started with 2 1-liter bottles, one that had 200 grams of carbs and another that just had water that I'd refill at the aid stations. I had 6 50-gram carbs gels in a 2-liter pack with 300 grams of carbs. That's a total of 800 grams or about 115 per hour. I use GOODLIFE nutrition to fuel all my racing and training, and if you'd like to try it out for yourself, then head over to fuelyourgoodlife.com and use code RADDADDIZZLE at checkout to save 20% off your next order. The pace starts to get pretty brutal on the rolling hills, and eventually me and 3 other riders get popped from the main group, and we watch as 9 riders in the lead group right away from us. Bye-bye, prize purse. And here are a few of the stats for the first 80 miles of the race. So 307 normalized power, 0.85 intensity factor, and 174 heart rate. This pinked out guy was riding a fixie. What a doofus, but I felt bad for him, so as we rolled up next to him, I gave him a good push to the top of the hill, and we were on our way. Chase had got a little bit of a warning from one of the motos earlier in the race that he wasn't allowed to go into his aero position when we were away from the motos and kind of just riding by ourselves in the middle of the cornfields. He looked at Nathan at one point and asked, "Hey, are you cool if I run puppy paws?" And of course, Nathan says, "I don't care, whatever makes us go faster." So then Chase was able to use his aero position a few more times. It ends up being me, my teammate Chase, and another guy, Nathan Spratt, from mile 80 all the way to the finish. And although we figured we had a pretty decent gap to the riders behind us, we were still nervous about guys like Pete Stetina and Russell Finsterwald, who are probably really strong and may have been chasing really hard because they had to stop for the mud clogging in their bikes early in the race. So we wanted to keep the pace rolling all the way to the finish to prevent getting caught by anyone from behind. Eventually we end up catching Tobin, who had popped from the lead group, and not too long after we catch him, we also drop him at one of the aid stations. Now, if our count is correct, this means that we could potentially put me and Chase both in the top 10 at a pretty big race. And here are the stats from the last 70 miles from the time we got popped all the way to the finish. You've got 266 normalized power, 0.73 intensity factor, and 164 heart rate. We pass and cheer on Kendra Gettle, wife of YouTube sensation Joe Gettle, who was doing her longest bike ride to date. And not to mention, she had ran 15 miles the day before. That's pretty tough stuff. With about 5 miles to go, me and Chase had somewhat of a silent team meeting while we were riding behind Nathan on how we were gonna close the deal on this race and get us both in the top 10. I had told Chase that he should attack and that I would sprint Nathan at the end, but Chase had said he didn't feel like he was strong enough to do an attack, so he told me to attack and that he'd sprint Nathan at the end. So with about 2 miles to go on one of the little risers going into the finish, I let a gap open and come blazing by with an attack, and Nathan does not respond, so I am able to solo in for 9th place, and Chase is able to win the sprint for 10th place. Team tactics? Maybe not. This was another one of those situations where you end up riding with a guy for 3+ hours, and you beat him, and you kind of feel bad about beating him at the end of the race, but I guess that's just how it goes. This final effort to the finish to get 9th place took me about 5.5 minutes at a normalized power of 369 and a heart rate of 184. The entire race altogether took about 7 hours and 10 minutes, 463 TSS, 292 normalized power, 0.80 intensity factor, that's nuts, 169 average heart rate, and 6,640 kilojoules burned. That's a big day. I was recently talking to a friend of mine about the Lauf gravel bike, and he asked me about the stiffness of the frame or the responsiveness of it. And I told him I don't know about all those minor details when it comes to stiffness and responsiveness, but what I can tell you is that there has been on more than one occasion this season where the Lauf Segla, because of its tire clearance and because of the leaf spring suspension fork, has given me major advantages over my competitors. And Gravel Worlds was a prime example of this. I'll take massive advantages over minor details any day. That's all I've got for this one. If you're interested in coaching with the coaches that me and Dylan Johnson work with, head over to Ignition Coach Co and use code RADDAD100 for $100 off your first month. And also, one of my partners, Abis, they make the awesome helmets that Vanderpool wears, well, and me and Chase wear. And if you want to get your hands on one of these helmets, they've just launched their direct-to-consumer site, abisusa.com, and you can use code RADDAD20 for 20% off your order. That's all I got for this one. See you guys in the next one.